Hello, everyone. I'm Asha Nayaswami. Today is April 21st in California, 2020, where this is being recorded. April 21st is Moksha Day. Moksha means spiritual liberation, and it's the day that Swami Kriyananda passed from this world. So it's a very powerful day because on these anniversaries of great souls, saints' days in the Catholic Church, are times when the vibrations of these great souls are especially vibrant. They're always present, but they're magnified on occasions like today. So that will be our subject. So let's start with the prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dearest friend, Swami Kriyananda, we open our hearts and minds and souls to the transforming power of your presence. Bless us, Swamiji, that we may follow in your footsteps of perfect discipleship, that we may walk where you have walked, live as you have lived, and realize God as you have realized. Make us one with thy infinite Spirit, Lord. We are your children. Bring us home to thee. Om. Peace. Amen. Oh my. Swamiji was 86 when he passed, and his health had been not good for years and years, and he'd been increasingly withdrawn. He was staying in Italy at that time. Narayani had been his constant caretaker and companion for a number of years. Shurjo was now also with her, and the three of them were living together in Assisi. I had always expected that when Swami died, somehow we'd all know that it was coming. This is the picture I had in my mind, that somehow the word would go out and gradually people would gather wherever he happened to be. For at least a decade, I always made sure that my passport was up to date. And when I had to, at one point, renew my passport, and that meant I had to send it in and have it brought back to me, I actually paid $250 to get it done in 24 hours because I couldn't bear the thought that what if something happened to Swamiji and I couldn't get there because I didn't have a passport. And that's not a small sum of money in the world that I live in, but I couldn't bear that I couldn't be ready. And I always thought that I would be there when he died. It's not even that it was a desire. It was just the way I thought things would be. There would be this, large deathbed experience and so on like that. In fact, of course, that Master died so suddenly in retrospect, you can see that he was warning, but he just died suddenly and there was no transition time. I don't know why I didn't notice that. But in any case, but at the same time, we all knew for a long time, and Swami would say, that just, especially after he went back to India in 2003, when he finished Conversations with Yogananda, which he finished in 2003, at the end of 2003, he really said, I've done everything I came to do. Conversations with Yogananda was the last of the notes that Swami had taken from his years with Master. And once all that was done, he really felt that he could pass. And instead he went to India and went another 10 years and started to work for Master over there. But we always knew that he was living on borrowed time. It was just what he was doing. It was borrowed time. But when he actually died, there was no warning. A little bit in retrospect, but not much. It just, as it happened, it was very interesting. We had finished that year, 2012. He died in April 2013. In 2012, we finished the movie Finding Happiness. We showed it to him in January. That April night, that very night, we had a premiere of the movie in our temple here. and showed it to our members. We have an annual members event. And so this year, the members event was the showing of that movie. I'd been involved in the making of it, and therefore I had access. And we came home from that, and I was exhilarated and exhausted, and I slept for a little while, and then I woke up. And so I was literally sitting right here with the phone right there at 11 o'clock-ish, about 11. And Devi calls and says, I just heard from Kirtani, Swami is having trouble breathing. I said, what does that mean? And Devi said, I don't know, that's all she said. So the phone goes down, and about 15 minutes later, Kirtani calls and says, Swamiji is free. That's what she said. And it was just like that. He was gone. Narayani writes about it in her book because she was present. And I also talk about it, of course, in Light Bearer. But my story in Light Bearer is taken from the people who were there because I wasn't there. And that was that, you know? Just he was off the planet. But it was so interesting when then it took a little time to sort everything out. It was a Saturday night. You know, we woke everyone up. We all went into the temple. We stayed in the temple till 2 or 3 in the morning. And then I came back and I started to go to bed. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's a Sunday service, and we can't just have like an ordinary Sunday service. So I got up again and started planning a Sunday service. And then by Sunday night, a lot of us talking on the phone to each other, and we realized we needed to go to Italy. Even though Swami was gone, we needed to go. And it was so interesting to me because I've gone to see Swami many times in many places in the world. And as soon as I'm on the bus, train, or taxi, or whatever it is, on my way, I'm just laser. Nothing matters. It's just like this. We arrived at the Rome airport, and it's a couple of hour drive to Assisi from there. And every time we've ever done there, we get to Rome, we get in the train, we get in the car, we do whatever it is, like this. All of a sudden, there was no hurry. There was just no hurry. And people were arriving in Rome from all over the world. And basically, we just sat down in a coffee shop for a couple of hours while people from America and some from India just sort of accumulated until we had everybody who was arriving, and then we all went together. But I realized this is the beginning of a whole new reality, because this is omnipresence. I mean, Swamiji has always been omnipresent in my heart from when he was in a physical body, when I used to see him every day. It's the relationship had this magnificently joyful element of his physical company, which was just an absolute delight. As I said to him once, you know, sir, of course, whenever you're ready to leave, I wouldn't want to hold you back, but it won't be any fun to be on this planet without you. And his answer was, I know, I've been through it. Speaking of Master. It was a very poignant remark on his part. So I have to say that was an enormous loss. The intermittent opportunity to be in that atmosphere. But the true relationship with Swamiji had always been heart to heart, without any necessary physical intervention. The physical intervention was extra, is what I would call it. The truth of the relationship was inward. But now all of a sudden, the physical was gone. And in the weirdest way, the way it came to me was the planet no longer has a geographic center. Because for all the years that I knew Swami, 45 years, there was always a geographic center to the planet, and that was wherever he happened to be. And whenever I was physically where he was, I was at the geographic center of the planet, and there was literally no other place to be except right there. And all of a sudden, it didn't exist. And the only place that I could make that center now was in myself. But he was still the geographic center of the planet. When we finally got to Rome, to Assisi, and Swamiji's body was in an open casket at that point. Yes, he was in a casket, but it was an open casket. It was there for about a week. We left before they closed it up and brought it to America. And I recall, let's see, we were having a service. That's right, we were having a service. And so the open casket, he's buried in flowers. He's looking so serene and so beautiful lying there. And then they started playing some recording of Swami that was so vivid that it was just like he was in the room. Of course, he was in the room, but, and I remember I looked up at the speaker thinking that somehow Swamiji was in the speaker. Just your mind plays funny tricks. I looked at the speaker and I kept trying to see Swami in the speaker, and I thought, no, he's not in the speaker. So I looked in the casket because there was his physical body, and it was quite clear that Swami wasn't in the casket either. And so I'm just like looking around the room, what do I do? I looked at the masters on the altar, but then I raised my eyes and I looked at the spiritual eye above the masters. Oh, that's where he is. And that's his reality, and that's my reality. So where is the separation? I can't say that I didn't weep. I did weep because it was the end of something that had been, it just was the defining reality of my life. And the absence of it was not a small thing. The way I put it to myself, Swami always held my kite string. And if nobody's holding my kite string, what's going to become of me? So the realization that he's still holding the kite string, he would never let it go, was something I had to remind myself of. Fortunately, he trained us well. So that has never wavered. And in fact, oddly enough, I and many others have found him more accessible. Swamiji himself said to us about Master, he said, you're lucky because you never knew Master in the body. In some ways, you're lucky, he said. Now, that seems like a peculiar statement, doesn't it? He said, because you don't have the confusion of feeling the omnipresent divine reality of Master and knowing, as Swami said, that he's in the next room having dinner. He said it was hard to reconcile sometimes, this charming, wonderful human personality with this other definition that was so much bigger. With Swamiji, when I really meditated on this, and I have, of course, a great deal over the years, the way I began to think about it, some of you may have heard me say this, it's like Swami's consciousness was oceanic. He lived in the depths of the deep spirit, the deep ocean of spirit, and his self was not confined. When I was asked just earlier this morning, what was it about Swami that captured me so vividly the first time I met him? And what I said is his consciousness had no boundaries. It was not something that I'd ever thought about. I knew it theoretically because I'd been reading about self-realization in saints for several years before I met Swami, but I'd never seen it. And when he walked into the room, I didn't anticipate that. I didn't even know such a thing existed, but I experienced it. And by contrast, I realized that I and everyone I knew was in a little box of egoic self-definition. And as far as I could see, Swami's consciousness had no edges. It just began with him and just went out as far as possible. So I was accustomed to swimming in that ocean of his consciousness. Now let me just think where was I trying to go with this? Well, I can't even remember why I started on that thought. But the reality of it is, let me think about this, that the accessibility of Swami actually became more after, that's what I was trying to say. It became more after he was out of the body because there was no necessity to be near or far from him. Master's own answer to the question when Swami posed it, after you are gone, will you be as much with us as you are now? And Master's words were, to those who think me near, I will be near. And that is a double meaning. I presume Master meant both of them. To those who believe that they can be in touch with me, who have the faith in themselves, in their own ability to rise beyond the limits of the ego. To those who believe that they can be in touch with me, we can be together. And also to those who, with their thoughts, bring me. When Jesus said, where two or more are gathered together, there am I in the midst of them. Am, meaning always, I'm there. And the way Swami defined that was not only when two or more disciples of Jesus are together, but when two or more of your own thoughts are together focused on the infinite, then you will discover that the infinite is already with you. And so we live in this interesting, fascinating world of shifting realities where saints and masters actually have physical incarnations, where they take physical bodies and they have personalities and they do things and they have disciples and things happen. And at the same time, there's a flow of energy through them that is never defined or limited by that. So that's what we're living with when we're living as disciples of Master through Swamiji, which is how he always put it to us. Within Swamiji never took the position of replacing Master, or even actually being essential to everyone in their relationship. But some of us, this is just simply the way it was, some of us access Master through Swamiji. And he himself said that. For some of you, he said, I am your channel. And through me, you will come to understand Master. That was an assignment he was given. I used to think of it at the time that Master was the king and Swami was the prince assigned to govern our particular province. And the king is not pleased if you ignore the prince he's put in charge. So we had to work through Swamiji in order to understand Master. And that's really what I gradually came to know. This morning when I was talking earlier on an earlier broadcast, I remember saying to Swamiji, because I began to realize this, every time Swami would talk about how Master lived and behaved and how he responded and how he taught and how he responded to life, I gradually realized that Swami was describing himself, and that how he described the way Master approached life and was a disciple was just exactly what Swami was doing. And I said, so everything that you say about Master, it seems to me like you're also saying about yourself. And what you do is the way Master did things. And what you don't do is because that's not the way Master did it. And Swami gave me the revelation, but he gave it to me in such a matter-of-fact way. He just said, of course. Now, you have to understand, Swami wasn't saying, excuse me. Swami wasn't elevating himself. And you see, this is sometimes it would be very confusing. Yes, of course, what Master did, I do, like that. It wasn't that at all. It was, I'm a disciple, how else would I behave? Just like that. Like, what is it to be a disciple? Except to attune yourself to the pole star that's in front of you and try to be in that vibration. And the remarkable thing about that is the more you stand in the vibration of the Guru, the more you stand in tune with yourself. This is the great mystery of this. Living at Ananda, living in Ananda as long as I have, all these years, it is such a kooky group of just individuals, each of whom has some unique thing to do. But what I perceived and have perceived from the beginning is our differences are like a 16th of an inch. But our differences manifest in marvelous ways, but underneath it, because we're all attuned to the same thing, it's like, well, a woman came to our temple many years ago, and she was a successful businesswoman. She was an extroverted person, very outgoing. She knew how to connect to people. She was a saleswoman, lovely person, and just very good with people. And she came, and she had been part of another church that hadn't really satisfied her, and she liked Ananda. So she started, to use her own word later, working the room, in a nice way, but just working the room. And so after Sundays, we'd have like a little social gathering, and she'd try to work the room, just make connections, make friends, and nothing worked. She said she felt like she was made out of Teflon, that just nothing, she just couldn't make connections. But she really liked what was going on there, and she liked the people. She just couldn't figure out how to connect with them. So finally, she just came to church one Sunday and she just looked at the masters on the altar and she looked at the picture of Swamiji. He was still living at that time. And she said, I'm not going to worry about them. I'm just going to worry about you. And she started trying to just connect to the gurus, to the vibration of God that comes through this particular lineage. And she said, as soon as she started doing that, she started making friends with all the people around her. And it was a very, very illustrative story from my mind, because what what ties our spiritual family together is our mutual attunement to something higher. Someone once asked me, is it necessary for a community to succeed? Does it have to have a spiritual basis? I said, well, it has to have something that gives people the motivation to transcend their egoic preferences. Because otherwise, communities just crash on the conflicting grounds of egoic preferences. So what definitely holds Ananda together is that we look to each other, but it's like we hold hands and look at the masters. And we hold hands and we look to Swamiji to help us know what our path to God realization is. And the more we attune to the particular ray that comes through him, and he says, as Master's work develops in the years to come, there will be countless families of Master, countless little enclaves, which we see all over the place, just in the short few decades that I've been part of this. You see these countless little places. And interestingly, it was because of the lawsuit that was filed against Ananda, where the original Yogananda organization wanted to hold a monopoly on the teachings and own the pictures and own the teachings and own the music and own the photographs and own the name, everything. When that monopoly was dissolved by legal action, all of a sudden, everywhere you look, you see Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, Sri Yukteswar Master, you hear his music, you see his songs, because Master actually left all of that in the public domain. He did very complicated, clever things. But what that did has allowed all those who feel that I'm inspired by this ray to be able to express it in whatever way they want. And some express it with more power and more clarity than others, but everybody, it belongs to all of us. And then Swamiji had a particular mission, and he has a particular family within the family. And that's the sweetness of the spiritual path, that there's families within families within families, even within Ananda. One of the marvelous things about Ananda is there's so many of us. And we're all so different one from another, that even within the family of Ananda, especially now that we all find ourselves quarantined with this explosion on the internet, you can just sit at home and you can go, from Italy through India, through Germany, through South America, through New Zealand, and you just find people who are masters, disciples, and Swami's children, just sharing from their hearts what it is about this path that inspires me. And each one of us in our own way just gets to be that perfect little unique snowflake. Swamiji said that the way he guided us, even when he was living, and I experienced this, but I couldn't have put it into words until he did. Because, for example, I have lived here in Palo Alto for more than 30 years, and this was an assignment given to us by Swamiji explicitly. I was sent here by him. But in all those years, even though I often talked to him about things that were going on, he gave me maybe 3 or 4 specific instructions. I mean, really, literally. But I realized as things evolved that none of the things I was doing were from my own. I was not the initiator. I was responding to flows of energy that I would just feel. And it gradually came to me fairly quickly. We were actually dedicating this community. And I was standing on the dais, and Swami was sitting a little bit behind me. And I was starting to talk about the process of this community, how it came about. A group of supportive investors bought the property, leased it to us, all of this. And then we were able to make a community. And I suddenly realized I didn't do any of this. It's just like I could feel the pulsing power was sitting behind me. And I actually had to move the microphone and pull it back a little so that we were more like this, because I couldn't stand in front of him. I couldn't have my back to him. I had to be able to speak to him and through him. But much later, Swami said, because someone accused him of, jokingly, but of abandoning them to figure out a project, Swami was emphatic. I never abandoned you, he said. My consciousness was always with you. And then he talked about how he worked. He said he would project thoughts to us, project ideas to us. And if those ideas resonated with our own feeling about how to go forward, and we were interested in receiving his inspiration, we would feel the idea, but it would come into us, and we would make it our own. That was exactly what I experienced with Swami. The inspiration would just come, but it would feel right. And then I would work with it until it was hard to tell what the source of it was. But if I did it right, it would always be in complete attunement with that flow. That's, he said, how Master worked. Swami said when he ran the monks for Master, when he was in charge of the monks, Master told him almost nothing. He said, because if Master had given me any specific advice, Swami said, I would have absorbed it from the outside and tried to make it work. But instead, Master enlivened my own intuition. And then I would act from that intuition. But you see, it's so subtle, because Swamiji and Master are holding the vibration. And if we wish only to express ourselves, then that very thought puts us out of tune. But if what we wish to be is an instrument of God, an instrument of Guru, an instrument of Swamiji's vision, then that very desire aligns us. And then we're always, Master said, ideas are not individual, they're universal. We merely attune ourselves. So the question is really quite a simple one. What do I want to attune myself to? I've always thought Swamiji had a better chance of knowing what to do than I did. And I never felt limited by his inspiration. I always felt liberated by his inspiration. Because after the inspiration came, it was up to me to manifest it. It wasn't sufficient to receive it. I had to then master my own limitations sufficiently to be able to bring it about. Do you understand? You see, it's a very fine line. Writing this book was for me the culmination of that effort. This was the fruit, and I've described it in other places, the effort that it took me to do this. But when I finally did it, I really was beginning to understand, I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. And Swamiji, I want to be your instrument, but the instrument has to act. Swami said once when he heard that God would speak through him, he said in the middle of a lecture, he just stopped talking for about 2 minutes. He said, pure silence in the middle of a lecture. And then he realized, he had to play a part too. It's very subtle. But once you begin to understand how we work together to manifest an ideal, to be instruments of God, Guru, and of Swamiji, then the possibilities become literally infinite. And our own potential, which is so limited by ego, at least to some extent, those limitations come down, and God can flow through us. This is all that Swamiji wants for us. He has no agenda of his own. He has one agenda, which is to free us from suffering and to give us bliss. And to all who received him, John said about Jesus, that power comes in. So today is Divine Moksha Day, the day when Swamiji's oceanic consciousness, this I forgot to finish. I began to understand that Swami Kriyananda had just been this little tiny opening on the ocean. And we lived a lot right there in that opening. And when Swami stopped breathing, that little door just closed, that quietly. But it was just, for him, it was just that much of a change. It was a bigger change for us, but it doesn't have to be. And that's the real truth of this day. God bless you.